All right, ready to dive deep into the English Globe podcast with me. I know you're all about leveling up your English, so we're going to skip those basic summaries. We're going straight for the good stuff. Those little nuggets of wisdom that'll really make a difference.
And this episode is perfect for that, It really digs into that difference between just like studying English and actually, living it.
Yeah, totally. It's like beyond just changing your phone settings to English.
Which, by the way, is still a good first step. They mentioned that on the podcast.
It is, it is. But yeah, it's more about like rewiring your brain to think in English almost.
Right. That whole immersion thing.
Yeah, immersion.
Like you're surrounded by it constantly.
I like that. Surrounding yourself with the language.
And that's where the whole neuroplasticity thing comes in.
Neuroplasticity. That sounds...
It's a fancy way of saying your brain changes based on what you expose it to. It's kind of like building a mental muscle for English.
So the more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Yeah.
So like, if listening to English news feels a bit overwhelming right now, how can we make this whole immersion thing a little less, I don't know, intimidating, more fun?
Well, they had that great story about Hannah from Japan, remember? She joined these online communities.
Oh, yeah.
All about her hobbies, where everyone spoke English. And it worked for her because she was genuinely interested in what they were talking about.
So it's about finding stuff that's actually relevant to you.
Totally. So think about what you love, cooking, gaming, whatever. There are communities out there for everything. And using English in those spaces, it just makes it like way more engaging.
That's such a good point. So it's about active engagement, not just passive listening.
Right.
But speaking of active, speaking English out loud is like my biggest hurdle. That mental block,
Yeah.
They talked about Leo from Brazil on the podcast.
I remember Leo.
Overcoming his shyness by joining like an online debate club.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of like pushing myself out of my comfort zone is the only way to really get better at speaking?
Well, even Leo had to start somewhere. What's interesting is that even just talking to yourself in English can help.
Oh, like talking to myself. I mean, I do that sometimes already.
I know. It sounds a bit silly, but it actually works.
Okay, yeah.
It's all about getting comfortable with the sounds of the language. When you speak out loud, even to yourself, it activates different parts of your brain.
Ah.
And it helps, automate those grammar rules and vocabulary so they just flow more naturally when you actually need them.
So instead of fearing those awkward silences in conversations,
Exactly.
I can use them as like practice time in my head.
Exactly. And they mention those language exchange apps too, like Speaky and Hello Talk. Those can be super helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Having that conversation partner, it can really accelerate your progress.
But I always get so intimidated by the idea of talking to like a native speaker. What if I mess up?
Everyone makes mistakes. It's part of the process, It's actually how you learn. It's like real-time feedback.
Okay, that's a good way to look at it. So it's more about seeing those mistakes as like stepping stones.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say I'm feeling all motivated and ready to jump into those conversations. How do I make sure I'm like actually making progress? They mentioned SMART goals.
Oh, yeah, SMART goals.
I know what it stands for, specific, measurable, all that good stuff. But how do I actually like apply that to learning English?
Well, think of them like your language learning compass. They keep you focused and prevent you from getting like overwhelmed by this massive goal of mastering English.
Right.
So instead of memorizing the whole dictionary, maybe your goal is to learn like 5 new words every day related to a specific topic.
Okay, that's manageable.
Yeah. And they told that story about Sarah from Canada, remember?
Yeah.
She wanted to improve her writing, so she set a SMART goal to write 1 paragraph in English every day for a month.
Oh, wow. And did it work?
It did. It totally worked.
So it's about breaking down those big goals into smaller steps, right?
Exactly.
But sometimes even those smaller steps can feel like, a chore.
I know what you mean. And that's where the whole make it fun thing comes in. The English Globe had that language expert on, and they emphasized finding materials that you actually enjoy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, what gets you excited to learn? What are you passionate about?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, I love watching documentaries, especially about, like, history and nature.
Oh, that's cool. So maybe you can find some documentaries in English on those topics.
Oh, yeah, I could.
And it's important to connect it to your why. Like, why are you learning English? What doors will it open for you? What experiences are you looking for?
That's a good question. I've never really thought about it that deeply. I guess I want to be able to connect with people from all over the world. and experience different cultures, through their own words and stories. And of course, traveling more confidently would be amazing.
There you go. See? You've got your why right there. Hold on to that feeling because it'll keep you motivated as we keep going.
I like that. I'm ready for more. Let's keep exploring.
Okay, let's do it. Welcome back. It's great how we're really making these tips work for you.
Right. It's not just about the ideas anymore. It's like actually using them.
Exactly.
And, speaking of actually using them, I remember Maria from Spain asked about listening skills on the English Globe.
Oh, yeah.
That's something I struggle with too sometimes,
It's a common one for sure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the podcast hosts, they went beyond just saying, like, listen to more English, which
Right.
is, kind of obvious advice.
Yeah, like just have it on in the background while I'm doing other stuff.
Right, right. While passive listening can help, they really emphasized active listening.
Oh, okay.
It's about engaging with the material, not just having it on in the background.
So what's the difference really between like hearing and actually understanding?
That's the key. It's about that deep understanding. The English Globe talked about authentic content. That's really important.
Authentic content. What does that even mean?
Good question. It means choosing materials that are made by native speakers for native speakers. Like, think about the difference between a textbook dialogue and a real conversation between two friends. The textbook is all perfect and planned, but real conversations, they have slang, idioms, natural rhythms.
So like watching movies or TV shows would be considered authentic.
Exactly. Even if you need subtitles at first, it's about getting used to how English actually sounds,
Right, right.
You mentioned watching French movies with subtitles.
Yeah.
And eventually you got so good you didn't need them anymore. It's the same with English.
Makes sense. It's like when you first hear a song in another language,
Oh, yeah.
it's just sounds.
Yeah.
But the more you listen, you start to pick out words,
Exactly.
and then maybe you can even sing along.
Right. And that actually reminds me of Ahmed from Egypt. He asked about expanding his vocabulary.
Yeah, vocabulary is tough.
It is. And the English Globe hosts, they had this great idea. Active reading.
So not just like skimming through stuff.
It's about really engaging with the text, looking up words you don't know. And this is where, again, your interests come in. If you're reading something you love, you're way more likely to remember those new words.
That makes sense.
So what do you like to read? Like in your own language?
I'm a big fan of historical fiction. I love those stories.
Oh, that's cool. So try finding some historical fiction novels in English, and don't be afraid to use a dictionary or one of those vocabulary apps.
Right.
Oh, and here's a tip I use. Keep a notebook just for new English words. Write the word, the definition, maybe even an example sentence.
That's a great idea, like my own little dictionary.
Exactly.
But sometimes, it feels like I'm getting bombarded with all this advice about learning English.
I know what you mean.
It's overwhelming. Do you ever feel that way?
All the time. And that's why it's so important to have like reliable sources like the English Globe. They cut through all that noise and give you strategies that actually work, They had that language expert on, Dr. Emily Hayes, remember?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
She had some really insightful points.
I especially liked what she said about patience.
Oh, yes.
Like, it's okay to not be perfect right away.
Exactly. She emphasized that language learning is a journey, not a race.
I like that.
There will be tough times. You'll want to give up sometimes.
Oh, yeah?
But the important thing is to keep going, even if it's just a little bit each day.
She also talked about technology.
Yeah.
How it can be good and bad for language learning.
Right. We have so many apps and resources now, but it's easy to, get lost in the digital world and forget about real-life conversations.
Yeah, that's true.
Think of technology as a tool to help you practice, not to replace real conversations.
So would joining like an online community or a language exchange group be helpful?
Absolutely. Dr. Hayes talked about finding a supportive community, online or in person.
Okay.
It gives you a space to practice speaking, get feedback, learn from each other.
Yeah.
And, it's really motivating to be around other people who get it, who understand the struggles.
It's easy to feel alone when you're learning a language, so that makes sense.
It does. It's about shifting your perspective from I have to learn English to I want to learn English and connect with others.
That's a much better way to think about it.
It is. It's not just about the rules and words. It's about connecting with people and experiencing the world.
I love that. So it's about the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. And speaking of journey, we're heading into the final part of our deep dive,
Oh, exciting.
where we'll uncover even more gems from the English Globe.
Awesome. Let's do it. Back again. We've gotten so many great tips from this episode. I'm ready to put them all to use.
Me too. It's amazing how you can find something new, even in stuff you think you already know.
Yeah, totally. You know what really stood out to me? How they talked about mistakes on the English Globe. Like,
Yeah.
they totally changed the way I think about them.
Right. It's like mistakes aren't bad. They're actually good.
Exactly. Remember that story they told about the listener who accidentally told someone they were delicious instead of delighted?
Oh, yeah, that was hilarious. But
Huh.
you know what? It shows you that it's okay to mess up sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. When you can laugh at yourself, it makes everything a lot less stressful, you know?
Definitely. And it helps you learn from those mistakes. Remember what they said. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and try new things, even if you might mess up.
I love that. It's
Mhm.
like language learning isn't just about being perfect. It's about growing as a person, too.
Totally. It's about connecting with people, experiencing new cultures, seeing the world in a new way.
I like that. So we've got all these amazing tools from the English Globe now. It's time to use them, right?
Absolutely.
So what's one small thing you can do today to start using these tips? Maybe change your phone settings to English. Listen to a podcast on your way to work.
Even just talk to yourself in English for a few minutes.
Every little bit counts, right?
Exactly. Keep practicing, keep exploring, and most importantly, have fun with it.
That's it for our deep dive into the English Globe. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And remember, keep learning and keep growing. See you next time.